Chapter 31. I was afraid of this. Sevrin stared at the city gate. Desimone gazed at the city, mouth open a bit. The portico had been lowered and the drawbridge raised. They've closed the city gates? Why? They always close them at night. Sevrin shouldered the pack Tesco had given Desimone. It's their policy no one can enter or leave once the gates close, and they've been strict about enforcing it ever since Tesco arrived. Desimone rushed to the edge of the dry moat. Wooden spikes protruded up from the bottom. "Excuse me," she shouted. "Please open the gates. It's me, Princess Desimone." "They can't hear you." Sevrin approached her. "Or they're not listening. If we had lanterns, we might have been able to show the night watchman you're here, but as it stands, no one can see your face." A chilly wind blew across the land, sending shivers across Desimone's skin. She held herself. "It's getting cold. Can we make a fire and sit till morning?" "Not a good idea." Sevrin motioned to the trees in the distance. "Wild animals roam these lands at night. A fire will attract them." "Then what are we to do?" "Nothing for it." Sevrin started to walk to the right. "You'll have to stay with my family tonight. This way." "You live outside the wall." Desimone's teeth started to chatter. "I didn't think anybody did." "My family are farmers. We need a lot of land." Sevrin took off his vest and put it on her shoulders. "Thank you." Desimone put her hands through the sleeves. The fabric was thin and didn't do much against the wind, but somehow it warmed her through. After a bit of a walk, a small cottage appeared on the field. Warm lantern light spilled into the dark surrounding it. As they approached, a voice boomed and echoed across the land. "Where is that boy? He should have been home hours ago." "Calm down, Timron," came another softer voice. "I know you're worried, but shouting won't help." "Tea, Mariella?" Timron shouted. "Who invites a farmer to tea?" "He only said a friend did," Mariella replied. "I should have asked which one." "Oh, dear." Sevrin rubbed the back of his head as he approached the house. "I'm later than I thought." "Have I gotten you in trouble with your parents?" Desimone stepped aside for Sevrin to open the door for her. "I had errands to run today." Sevrin gave a sly grin. "Father probably had other work for me to do as well." "Sevrin!" Desimone clicked her tongue. "Slumping out at work? I thought you more industrious than that." She gave him a grin. Sevrin laughed. "I shall try to mend my ways, your highness." He bowed and held the door open for her. "See that you do." Desimone walked into the house, only to face a large man who whirled on her. "Sevrin, where have you—" He halted. "You're not my son." "Oh." A woman stood. "Hello." "Good evening." Desimone gave a slight dip. The two gazed at her, their faces white. It was as if they had seen a spirit come to haunt them. "I'm sorry I'm so late, father." Sevrin walked in. "Sevrin?" The woman, Mariella, motioned to Desimone. "Who is this?" "Oh, Sevrin rubbed the back of his head. "This is Desimone." Mariella's mouth dropped open. "The princess?" Sevrin bit his lips together and nodded. Mariella covered her mouth and sank into a seat. "What is she doing here?" Timron said. "Well, father," Sevrin inhaled through his teeth. "It's rather a long story." "It isn't really." Desimone crossed the house to where a fire roared in the fireplace. "Sevrin saved the life of a dragon, and as thanks the dragon invited us to tea. Sevrin was escorting me back home, but the gates were shut for the night. I need a place to stay, if you please." "The short version." Sevrin placed Desimone's pack at the door. Mariella gave Sevrin a look. "I will need to hear the long version later." Sevrin flinched. "Yes, Mum." "Are you Severin's mother?" Desimone took Mariella's hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. If I remember correctly, you grew the beautiful flower Sevrin presented to me, 6 years ago? A pink peony, simply lovely. I have it pressed in a book." Mariella blinked. "I'm surprised you marked it." "To date, my good woman, I have not seen a more beautiful flower. You must be commended. You're quite the gardener." "Thank you, your highness." "You must be his father." Desimone turned to Timron. "I don't think anyone has ever apologized to you for the jest my father made at yours and Severin's expense. Please forgive him. He had no intention of punishing Sevrin, and I promise you I treated him to several weeks of silence for it. His jest was in poor taste." Timron blinked. Glancing at Sevrin, he nodded. Yes, I forgive him." "Thank you." Desimone gave him a curtsy. "It's a weight off my mind." "I'm surprised you remembered all that," Sevrin said, walking up to her. "I told you, Sevrin." Desimone looked into his eyes. "It's my most precious memory." Severin's face flushed red. Desimone laughed to herself. That shade of red was quickly becoming her favorite color. "Now that that's settled," Mariella stepped in between them. "Sleeping arrangements. Tonight you can sleep with me in my bed, princess, if you don't mind. Timron and Sevrin can sleep in the other." Timon nodded with a grunt. It seems perfectly reasonable. Desimone held her hands behind her back. Good. Mariella clasped her hands. Now you two will be hungry, I expect, unless you're full from tea. We finished eating a while ago, Mum, Sevrin said. I wouldn't mind a morsel or two. I would like something as well. Desimone patted her stomach. I'm a bit peckish. I'm happy to oblige, but we don't have anything fancy. Mariella walked to the stove. Please don't trouble yourself. Desimone watched her busy herself about the larder. Anything will be fine. Pray, have a seat. Mariella motioned to the table. Desimone dusted off the wooden seat and sank into it. The small cottage was nothing like Desimone had ever seen. Onions and ropes hung from the ceiling, while wooden plates and cups adorned the shelves. 2 beds stood across from one another in a small space, and lanterns shed their flickering lights from their places. Everything from cloth to clothes to tools to pans and pots had been tucked into every conceivable space. It was cramped, yet cozy. As Mariella filled the house with cheerful chatter, Desimone's eyes fell on Sevrin and his father. They stood by the door, speaking in low tones, or rather, Sevrin spoke while Timon listened with folded arms. Judging by his gestures and expressions, Sevrin was telling his father about the dragon and how Desimone had come to appear in the house before him. Resting her cheek on a hand, Desimone watched Sevrin. He wasn't anywhere near as muscular as Galloway, but as he spoke and gestured, Desimone saw how toned he was, arms strengthened by tilling the soil. And though he still had a bit of baby fat in his cheeks, his face struck a manly profile. By next year he'd make a striking figure, yet his humility oozed out of every pore. Desimone found herself sighing before she could stop herself. Your Highness, Mariella set a plate of fruit, bread, and cheese in front of Desimone. I wonder if you'd indulge me a moment. Please, Desimone snapped her attention off of Sevrin. Go ahead. Mariella hesitated a moment, her eyes studying Desimone. A short time ago, Sevrin told us about a girl he fancied. Desimone stiffened. Did he? He did. I see. Desimone felt her neck muscles tightened. What did the wench look like, she wondered. Probably some snaggled tooth. Is the girl you? Desimone froze and allowed her dark thoughts to dissipate. Severin's words back in the dragon cave drifted back to her. His confession of love and how he looked at her. I believe I am. Oh, Mariella sunk to her seat. No wonder he said he couldn't court you. Why not? We're farmers, your highness. Mariella cocked her head. Could you accept a farmer as a suitor? I've never had one asked before. Desimone turned her gaze to Sevrin again. He must have finished his story, for he was silent, searching his father's face with pleading eyes. Timon studied the floor for a moment, shaking his head. A smile cracked his stony face. He reached out and pulled Sevrin into a hug. Sevrin wrapped his arms around him. Desimone rested her cheek on her hand again. I don't think I'd mind it, she said. Oh, I see. Mariella let her eyes rove over Desimone. This is surprising, she muttered. Sevrin, she said out loud, come and eat. The 2 of you will have a busy morning, so you must sleep early. Yes, Mum. Sevrin sat beside Desimone. I have so many errands to run tomorrow. It's a good thing it's market day. Desimone swung around to Sevrin. I've always wanted to see the city during market day. Do you mind taking me? We have to go through the market to get to the castle, so sure, Sevrin said. Thank you. Desimone placed her hand on his arm. I'm so excited. Whenever one of the knights escort me, there's always kerfuffle. I've always wanted to see what it's like when no one knows I'm there. Sevrin gazed at her hand on his arm. His face flushed again, and he averted his eyes. I don't think it's possible for you to walk around anonymously, Princess, Timon said, sitting on one of the beds. Everyone will recognize you. You'd be surprised, Timon. Most commoners wouldn't recognize their royals without their fancy clothes. There's still the clothes. She can't go out in public without wearing something, and we've nothing here a princess would wear. Sevrin sighed. I think father is right. I'm sorry, Princess. I will take you to the market, but I doubt anyone will fail to recognize you. I see. Desimone lowered her eyes. It would have been nice. Oh, Princess. Sevrin placed a hand on her shoulder. She put her hand on his. Don't be sad, your highness. Mariella smiled over her shoulder. These things have a way of working out. You sound like you're scheming, Mariella, Timon said. Me? Never. Mariella winked at Desimone. Why am I not convinced your mother isn't planning something? Desimone said to Sevrin. I'm not sure. Sevrin shook his head at his mother. I'm not completely convinced either.